Bheki.
Hey,
Hello,
how's
hello.
it going, John? Can you hear me?
I got you now, mate. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Awesome. So, thanks for doing this, man. I'm coming at this is live today, so I've never done a live stream before, but I thought it'd be fun to mess around with.
Yeah, same here. I'm actually quite nervous.
Well, you were recently in a documentary film. You got nothing to worry about.
Nah, I was extremely nervous even that in that documentary.
Say again?
Now, I was extremely nervous when I did the documentary as well. So,
Well, man, thanks for taking the time to do this. I guess, on that not on that topic, the best place to start might just be, a bit about you and your background, and then how you got involved in this documentary, and then we'll take the conversation from there.
yeah, my name is Bheki Mahlobo. I am an economics student from South Africa, currently studying at a university called University of South Africa. I also work part-time. So basically my background is I'm just like an ordinary guy, ordinary student studying economics. Um, how I got involved with that documentary was when I asked one question, and that question just like changed my life completely. It like flipped everything upside down in a good way. So um, the question I asked was out of frustration because I saw that there was so at the time I was into Bitcoin, right? And I saw that there was a different perspective from people that were doing Bitcoin than like the mainstream economists. Mainstream economists, I thought that they were filled with contradictions in the analysis and the mathematical models and stuff. And I saw that like people from the Bitcoin space, they knew the consequences of fiat, the negative consequences of fiat. And so I essentially asked the question it was to an economist called Davi Rut, who's an economist I respect here in South Africa. And my question was to him was, what's his opinion of individuals using Bitcoin as an exit point, essentially, to protect their store of value from central banking and fractional reserve banking. That was my question. I did not phrase it exactly like that in the documentary. I think it wasn't like exactly like that, but that's what I meant essentially. Yeah.
And
So yeah. Sorry, continue.
yeah, no, that's cool. So like how did the documentary come about? Like, why did they choose you to be in it?
Yeah. So yeah, when I asked that question, it actually like caused an explosion of eyes to be on me. A lot of people were really interested because they were asking like, who's this young guy talking about like Mises and Austrian economics and talking about Bitcoin? And Tam and Andrew approached me. Tam and Andrew are the people that produced the documentary. They approached me and they said they would like me to be on the documentary. They thought I was this amazing kid, even though I thought I was just crazy, had a big mouth and stuff. And it was like, yeah, let's get you in this documentary. We're shooting a documentary. It's on the hush hush. Don't tell anyone. And yeah, I was like, all right, cool, let's do it.
That's awesome, man. And I don't know if the documentary is banking on Africa, the Bitcoin
Yeah,
revolution, right? So
yeah,
I think
exactly.
it came out, was it this month or last on Prime, on
It,
Amazon
it's
Prime?
it's this month, about now, probably about a week ago. I think it was last week. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
Amazon Prime.
I watched it a couple days ago, and I consume every bit of Bitcoin content that I can get my hands on, probably like most of us. But
Yeah,
it's always fascinating to see the how different people from different parts of the world in different circumstances interact with Bitcoin and what it means to them. Because
mm,
obviously it's going to mean different things to different people, and its applications are so broad that it has the ability to do that.
yeah.
What was like what first? What's your rabbit hole story? What first brought you to Bitcoin? How did you first hear about it? And when did you have that moment where it clicked?
It clicked. Yeah, see, it's a bit of a gradual story for me because it came from years of asking questions. I just noticed that simple things started to get a little bit more expensive, and I didn't really get my questions answered until I was introduced to economics in high school. Um, it was my economics teacher at the time was a crazy gold bug. He was heavily interested into gold, and there was a time where he introduced us to central banking and fractional reserve banking. That's when I asked a lot of questions, and he basically gave me more resources to read about, like to read about central banking, fractional reserve banking, and all that. And yeah, that's when I found Mises. And in this time, I saw a movie called Dope. That was the first time I heard about Bitcoin. But this movie didn't really cover Bitcoin in a positive light. I think in the movie it was used to buy drugs and all that, and it
Mm.
was made as if that's the only thing you can do with Bitcoin. So I didn't pay it much attention then, even though I should have, honestly.
Yeah,
Until
like the rest of us.
yeah, until like years later, I heard about it again. I think this time from Peter Schiff. He didn't like Bitcoin, he still doesn't. And so it made me actually want to do a little bit more reading, right? And so I joined this Telegram group, uh, South African Bitcoin Telegram group, and they suggested to me that I should read Saifedean Ammous, the Bitcoin Standard. And then that's when everything clicked for me, because in the first few chapters of the book, he actually does not talk about Bitcoin. He talks about the history of money, and those concepts I was familiar with my reading of Mises. And so when he started incorporating that into like Bitcoin, that's when I was like, oh man, I need to get into this now.
Yeah, like can't waste another moment. I got to
Yeah,
get
I
deep into this
definitely,
shit.
yeah. Yeah, that's when like everything just fell into place. Yeah, man, that book did a lot for me, honestly. Yeah,
It's so crazy how, and like obviously Safe has gotten a lot of praise for his book and he's become,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, a very well-known person in the space and rightly so. But it's like it's just so crazy how all it takes is like information can change an individual and can change the world so quickly. Like
yeah,
once,
yeah,
you know, for me, I was into Bitcoin for a long time before I read the Bitcoin Standard, but I never and I always appreciated the hard cap, right? I knew that like not being able to grow the supply was a virtue in my
yeah,
opinion. It was a good thing. But
yes,
I never considered the concept of absolute scarcity. It was just not a concept that I had considered before. And when I did, like you're reading the page and you wait, you go like, hold on, let me read that again. You read it and you're like, oh shit. You know, you're like, oh, it's a way bigger deal than I thought it was.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
it is.
and so what year, what timeline was this on? When did that happen for you?
I think I read the Bitcoin Standard in 2019. I think it was
Oh, so
2019. No,
relatively
wait.
recently.
Yeah, relatively recently. I'm very new to like Bitcoin. I wish I was an OG, but like I'm
You
extremely
will
new. I
be.
think, yeah, I will be. I think this was when was this 2018? No, it was 2019. I think that's when I read the Bitcoin Standard. But I bought my first Satoshis. I think it was December 2018,
Good times.
and then later on I read the Bitcoin Standard, and then that's when I was like, okay, I need to buy Bitcoin. I need to save in Bitcoin as much as I can.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And because it was kind of that late, or that recent rather,
yeah,
were you able to avoid the altcoin casino or did you have any inclination to go down that road?
yeah. I think I was lucky enough to avoid the altcoins. Mainly because of like the people that I was like my friends. They didn't like altcoins, and so I think there was a trend we used to do. I think it was like every weekend or something. We'd always find some reason to bash altcoins. We didn't view them as as sound as like Bitcoin, and so I just completely avoided all of the altcoins. Even when who's this guy, Roger Ver, when he stopped talking about Bitcoin, started talking about Bitcoin Cash, we saw like, oh, this guy used to be called like Bitcoin Jesus. Like, what is he doing now? And yeah, so I completely avoided all altcoins. I just do Bitcoin.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, he went from Bitcoin Jesus to Bitcoin Judas pretty
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like you got a bunch of friends like in your social circle that are into Bitcoin as well?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's
A
sick,
lot of,
man.
yeah, it's very lucky, man. A lot of my friends are into Bitcoin. Even okay, so there are some that are not heavily into Bitcoin. They are extremely skeptical of Bitcoin and are rather interested in gold. So
Yeah.
it's either they're into Bitcoin or they're into gold. It's one of
Well,
those
I
two,
mean, to be
or
honest,
both.
even
Yeah,
that is interesting because like in my social group, like in my hometown,
yeah,
and I've been living away for a long time, but I'm here now. And when I come back, like people don't even have a consideration of the quality of their money. None.
yeah, yeah,
It's just Canadian dollars and that's it. So
yeah,
even to be in a group like I think you and I would probably both agree that Bitcoin is far superior to gold in many different ways and ultimately as money. But
yeah,
just to have people in your friend group that are like thinking about money in that kind of a way to appreciate the qualities of even gold is pretty unique.
yeah, yeah. It's kind of crazy actually how I came across like these group of friends. I think it's mainly people that share similar interests as me because it all starts with asking questions,
Mm.
asking dangerous questions like why does the government need to be in control of money, right? The textbook was not properly explaining that. And so we started to dig for ourselves as to like why do they like have to like control money, and they don't need to.
Yeah.
And so now this is something that I see with my friends, but like an average South African, I think they are aware of Bitcoin, but it's not immediate to them that they should buy Bitcoin. I think perhaps in a few years time it'll become more obvious for them that okay, I need to find a proper store of value than saving in the rand,
Mhm.
because every month on average the rand loses about 4%. That's like the last
What?
inflation that we had, like four, like, so it's like
Every
inflation
month?
last, yeah, like when they report the CPI inflation, they states around 4.1% or around 3%, somewhere along those ranges. So, but if you average it out on a yearly basis, then it's like what, 4%, 3% there.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's, in most cases the CPI has some fishy business in how it's
yeah,
calculated, right?
yeah, 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 exactly.
So after you read the book, you scooped up some of your first Bitcoin. You've got this, group where you can talk about these ideas with, or with who,
Yeah, yeah.
with these people you can talk about these ideas with. Um, what has the last, 12 to 16 months looked like for you? Like, obviously recently the documentary,
Yeah.
but in between the documentary and reading the Bitcoin Standard, I guess, what has that time looked like for you?
Um, that time was mainly quiet. It was just me reading, my personal reading. I always like to read a lot of stuff from Mary Rothbard and the guys from Mises as well. I like watching their YouTube content because they always have a yearly Mises year where they educate Austrian economics. So I watch that and I read a lot of stuff about Bitcoin, try to learn coding as well. So it's been really quiet until like recently, until like the documentary came out. That's when like stuff started to get crazy for me. A lot of people starting to reach out from around the world, saying like, "Yo, man, like, I really liked your segment in the documentary." I was like, "Man, I'm just like an ordinary guy." It's like, and like, it's actually really amazing that someone like connected with like my story. That was cool. That's
Yeah.
something I appreciated. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. I think it part of that is just we all believe so strongly in what this thing represents and the implications of it and the solutions that it represents. And when we see people anywhere in the world, like it doesn't matter if it's in Africa or Asia or North America, South America, and we see them like understanding it, understanding the value and wanting to use it and integrate it and have it spread more. Like I think we're as a global. I know some people in this space hate the word community, and I don't mean
Yeah.
it in the sense that everyone has to act in the same way, but
Yeah.
that
Exactly.
everyone is having this similar light bulb moment. We just want to connect with each other. We want to be like, oh, you saw it too? Awesome. Like let's chat,
Yeah.
let's connect.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I've seen right now after like the documentary. Yeah, sure. Yeah, some of them we act differently, but there's
Yeah.
like that one moment where we kind of connected, which
Yeah, I
is
mean, Bitcoin is
amazing.
bringing together a lot of people, whatever the hell you want to call that, whatever. If you don't like the word community, fine. But like
Yeah,
the understanding and appreciation of Bitcoin is bringing together people from all over the world over this same thing, and it's awesome. It's and
yeah,
I've
it
met
is.
so many great people as a result of it. It's phenomenal. Like I can have a chat with you right now about this, and we're gonna have a mutual understanding that
Yeah,
probably far exceeds even my conversations with most of my friends I've known for 20 years. You know,
jeez, that's
you're lucky, man. You got
yeah,
a group of like Bitcoiners and hard money folk around you. It's
yeah.
they're
That's
not that common around where I am.
yeah, that's because like most of them are like heavily inspired by Mary Rothbard or some of them by Ron Paul. So
Yeah,
they're quite familiar with like sound money. And it's only been recent that I've started to make these group of friends. Because before that, it wasn't that wasn't the case. Most of my friends came from like from universities. I mean, I still am friends with them as well.
yeah.
But yeah, yeah, yeah. These new ones are like heavily inspired by like Austrian economics, Mary Rothbard, Ron Paul, the likes of, yeah,
I never thought, I've always been a curious person, so I liked a good, like, I never liked small talk. I've always liked the deeper subjects,
yeah,
but I still have to say, like, I don't think I ever imagined that my idea of like a good Friday night would be like getting together with three or four like hard money, Bitcoiner type people and just talking about like, the history of money or the implications of sound money in our current world and all the different ways it could fix this and fix that. Like, and that's my idea of
yeah,
a good time now. I don't want to go to the pub and just drink beers and talk about like politics, like local politics or whatever the hell is going
yeah,
on. I want
yeah,
to talk about
yeah.
this big, big, big thing that's happening right now.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we do drink as well. Like
Yeah,
we talk
sure.
about Bitcoin more while we drink.
Yeah, no, don't get me wrong.
Unfortunately, we
Lubricating with
couldn't.
a few beers is great.
Yeah, that's when the conversation. That's when like the proper conversation comes out, and we start bashing uh, governments, central bankers, all of that. That's when it all comes out. When we have a good can of beer.
Yeah, man. Every good revolutionary discussion needs a few beers, right? Otherwise, you're
Yeah,
just not amped up enough. You're too calm for revolution.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true,
um,
man.
what was I going to ask you? So the like a lot of people when they have that light bulb moment and they really go down the rabbit hole, they tend to want to evangelize, right? Because they've had this kind of epiphany and they want to like tell their parents and their friends and their siblings and whatever. Did you have that kind of a like a response, or have you mostly kept it to only the people that have a similar interest and saw it the same way?
Yeah, like absolutely. The first time, I just wanted to tell every single one, every single person that I met. I wanted to tell them like, "Yo, man, like, you should buy Bitcoin, or if you don't like Bitcoin, look at gold. Because if you look at the rand, it's depreciating like every month. Whenever they print money to buy government bonds, that's inflationary. It's going to depreciate. And so I, that's how it first started. And then I started to notice that like certain individuals didn't listen to me. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm perhaps wasting my time with those folks. I should rather start talking about this stuff to people that are really interested, people that see like the consequences of having fiat. So now I just mostly keep it to myself, or I just talk about it with my friends. That's
Yeah.
about it.
And so you're studying economics in school, right?
Yes, I am.
And when
Yes.
like how much more of your program do you have?
So I'm in my final year now. So this is my final year. And
You
yeah,
mean this
it's
is the last semester?
no, like this is the okay, so this is the first semester. So there's
Right.
2 semesters. I'm
Yeah.
after this one, I'm left with one more semester, and then I'm done.
Right.
Yeah,
Because right,
yeah.
right
So
now,
yeah,
yeah.
continue. Sorry.
So when you're done, what's the plan? What's on your mind?
The plan after I'm done is to probably it's continue working because I already have a job. So I'm going to work there more because I love my job, honestly.
What do you do?
So I work as an analyst at the think tank. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to mention them because I didn't tell them I'm doing this interview. Sorry.
Well, you don't have to say anything you don't want to,
Yeah, but yeah, so I work as an analyst for this think tank here in South Africa, and we basically analyze macro trends and try to identify risks, usually government risk, central bank risk, anything that basically we see as a risk to like businesses, usually small businesses, large businesses, the ordinary South African. That's what we try to identify, not only here in South Africa, but also around the world as well. So after I'm done with my degree, I plan to continue my work there because I enjoy working there. And it's funny thing is like I got that job by like you see that question, that documentary, right? It's like what I said, that question just flipped everything upside down because a lot of people started to get interested in me and they reached out and I started to talk to a few individuals. Um, and one in particular, Pete Leroux, who is the CEO of Sageliga, which is a NGO here in South Africa that protects small businesses. He was hosting like I would say a Mises South Africa. I would call it Mises South Africa, where he was educating like his clients about Austrian economics or economics in general. And yeah, so that's when I met like my current boss there, and we started to have a chat and we hit things off. So yeah,
so
yeah.
the
So
job is recent.
the job is very recent. I started as an intern last year, October, and I got a job the beginning of this year. Yeah,
Sick.
very recent.
So how do you like I think that's an awesome, especially for a Bitcoiner, it's like almost a dream job because you get to like
Yeah.
constantly assess the macro landscape and comment on it and get paid for it, which sounds awesome.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
But how do you avoid, like, are you allowed to be as presumably negative as I think you might be on central banking and macro
Yeah.
factors, or do you have to kind of like take a middle path approach to how you articulate your criticisms?
No, I can be 100% I can be 100% be my perspective without holding anything back. I think that's why I was hired there in the first place because they saw this young kid who is very skeptical or critiques central banking, and they also do not 100% agree with some of the measures that central banks do currently, such
Yeah.
as the cutting of interest rates and the printing of money. They do not necessarily agree with that. So I think that's why it was easier for them to like hire me because of my opinions and such.
Where does this like for the NGO or for any NGO? So I don't want to just focus on the one you work for, but like any macro NGO think tank sort of entity, where do you think or where do you know that the commentary ends up? Like what audience or market is it for?
It's usually for Um, it's usually for small businesses. That's what I see here in South Africa. It's usually for small businesses, or it's just like normal, ordinary, like South Africans. It's like, but the people that really like listen to it, it's like someone who perhaps own a small restaurant
Right.
or a small car dealership or something small. It's usually those individuals that really deep dive and like actually look at this information and take it in. I think, but even so, even like some of the large corporations as well, they also do listen to it. Um, but yeah, yeah. So
And I'm obviously a Bitcoin extremist because I would think like you'd have to write like, yo, all of this is extremely precarious to say it lightly, and it's going to end badly. So you should probably factor that into your economic calculation, i.e.,
yeah,
you should buy some Bitcoin. That's what like my analysis would be. But how do
yeah,
you like? How do they integrate your perspective and your insights into their business behavior? Because they take these things, but their timeline is daily, right? They have to make a sale on a daily basis. They have costs on a daily basis. And,
right.
on a daily basis, it's easy to get lost in focusing on the day-to-day grind and miss the macro picture. And even if you see the macro picture, like for example, my family's in the restaurant business, right? And I've been,
Hmm.
saying for a long time to my family, like there's a lot of very challenging economic things on the horizon, and there should there should be, you guys should be aware of that. But it's really hard to plan at all for that kind of stuff to come, because you still need to generate as many sales as you can, and you still need to, like, it's not so easy as just saying, oh my god, central banking is horrible and it's going to, indebt the country and collapse the currency possibly at a point in the future. And what do I do as a restaurateur to prepare for that?
Yeah, yeah. The thing about it is that we cannot necessarily provide financial advice. What we do is we try to paint a picture,
Right.
right? We look at what's currently happening in South Africa, and we also look at what happened previously in South Africa as well. And what we do is we try to paint a picture for our clients so that they can be able to carry their decisions firmly knowing what's currently happening.
Hmm.
We try not to advise them on what to do, but we make the picture as clear as possible so that they know themselves what they can do
Right.
to essentially save themselves.
Are your colleagues, are you the Bitcoiner in your office, or are your
Ah,
colleagues,
no, I don't think so. No. It's strange, man. Like recently I've been like around some crazy people, gold bugs, Bitcoiners. It's crazy. It's not only me. I think there are some of my coworkers that either own Bitcoin or gold. They do not publicly state it, but in conversations we do talk about it.
right? Why don't they publicly state it?
Why? I honestly do not know.
Is there a risk, like in the current?
Perhaps they just like protecting themselves. Maybe if someone knows that they have Bitcoin or gold, they might try to invade the house or whatever. Maybe it's that aspect of it, but I'm not particularly entirely sure as to like why they do not entirely publicly state it. But I'm sure
Yeah.
if they would get like a question publicly, then they would like talk about it perhaps. But
Yeah.
they haven't gotten that question yet.
Do you have those concerns, like safety concerns, being public?
Yeah, yes, yes, I was. Um, in fact, when they asked me to do that documentary, I was like, yo, man, like, how many people are gonna see this?
Right.
And when it dropped, I was like, yo, this is actually scary. Now everyone knows I own like Bitcoin. I don't talk about it on Facebook, or I do on Twitter sometimes, but like around like Facebook and other social media, I usually don't talk about it because I'm really concerned about the safety aspect of it. But
Yeah.
I guess it's out there now.
Yeah, oh, it's out there now, dude. So you might as well just like make sure your
Yeah,
security is on point, and then.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. As long as I take precautions,
And
then
the weird thing is like, so many people, so many like normies that I've talked to about Bitcoin, they'll always be, because a lot of people, like one of the dominant contexts that they've heard about Bitcoin in is like Bitcoin millionaires or billionaires, right? Like someone who got super rich by being an
right,
investor in the first couple years, and then in 2017 they just became a schmillionaire, and that's like what's in a lot of people's minds. So when I talk
right,
about Bitcoin to people, they're like, "Oh, so you're like one of these Bitcoin like millionaire
right.
billionaires?" I'm like, "No, no, I'm
No,
not." But people just assume if you have any, you have a shitload, right? And
yeah,
that's not
exactly.
the case for most of us.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of them have that fallacy that if you own Bitcoin, you're going to become rich. I don't view Bitcoin as like a get rich quick scheme. I view it as I don't want to be poor scheme,
Right.
protecting my store of value scheme. Or I wouldn't even call it a scheme. Sorry about that. But like that's how I view like Bitcoin. Yeah, like if someone like knows that I have Bitcoin, they think that I have a lot of it and I'm like wealthy. I think that's what I've seen with some of the people that saw the documentary. They thought like, yo, this guy actually has like a lot of this thing. He must be a millionaire or something, but
Yeah,
that's not the case.
I know. I know.
Yeah.
But I know what you're saying about like not get rich quick, but like make sure you don't get poor slowly. But it's
Yeah.
just it's gonna, that will be the result in relative terms. Like if everybody else is
Right.
holding an asset that's depreciating rapidly, and you're
Right.
holding one that's maintaining its value but also appreciating because demand for it is going up in that
Right.
climate, then relative to the money that everybody else holds, the value will accrue to you, right? So and
True.
who knows how quickly that will happen, on what time scale, and what the next run will be like. But I think, for anybody who's publicly vocal about this stuff, whether you have, you know, 10 sats or 10 million sats or 100 million sats or whatever, you know, you got to make sure that your security, your like, is on point, so that, you know, if any issues or circumstances arise, that you're as protected as you can be. Because, I've always been I totally respect people that want to stay anonymous with all of this, and I get it.
Right.
Um, but for me, it's too much of an important thing. It's too exciting. It's too meaningful to me
Yeah.
to stay quiet. And I know this is going to happen regardless of my voice or not. But if my voice can save, people that I care about, or people that might want to listen to my voice, or accelerate the timeline of this thing at all, I think it's worth it, because the existing paradigm is extremely damaging in many different ways to many different people. And, I would like it to happen sooner,
Yeah,
for
and
myself.
I honestly do appreciate people like yourself, John. People that are like out there creating content about like Bitcoin, because it makes it easier for people to actually like get an interest to it. Like, and I'm sure it's actually hard to like make it interesting. I mean, for me, like I'm an economics student, so this stuff is like extremely interesting to me. But like for someone that hasn't lived in a country that has experienced like hyperinflation, they're not particularly like interested in Bitcoin.
Hmm.
So I applaud the work that you guys are doing, honestly, like the podcasters, the writers, and all that. You guys are making it easy for people to read about this technology and to essentially get on it.
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate that. And I feel the same way. There's so many, just motivated, passionate, intelligent, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, people in this space that are putting out writing or podcasts or documentaries or videos. And it's just a beautiful thing to see, like all these people coming together. Yes, there's self-interest involved, and that's totally fine, but there's also an altruistic component of it.
Right.
They want this to be available to more people, because they know of the positive impact it can have. And just being able to interact with those people is like payoff enough, as far as I'm concerned, for being involved in this and doing this kind of work. But it's but you're right. Most people aren't. Most people won't be motivated until it's necessary. Until it saves their ass in some way. So in
Exactly.
in Canada, and I think the Canadian government has been very irresponsible with debt and money printing, et cetera. But
Mm.
nobody pays attention to that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
as long as your real estate goes up by 5 to 10% a year, or whatever it is, as long as your stock portfolio goes up by whatever percent, then people don't care at all. They don't realize the connection between the money that's used in a society and the inequality and the poverty rates and the economic dislocation and violence and all sorts of things. They don't realize how it's all connected.
Yeah. If it's
um
not immediately visible to them, then it's out of sight, out of mind, right? It's
100%.
not
And
a, yeah.
which is why I think, as kind of crass as it sometimes sounds, like NGU technology, right? Number go up technology is the best way to get people's attention, because
Right.
nobody thinks about the intellectual nooks and crannies and about money, but everybody wants more of it. And if they
Yeah.
think, Bitcoin is a way to get more of it, then that will draw them in, you
Are
know.
you referring to that meme, orange men go up? What is that meme? I forgot
Orange
it.
coin good, number go up.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
So it's become like another meme now to use NGU technology, because
Yeah.
some people, everyone likes to talk about the latest technology. So you can work it into a conversation, be like, yo, have you heard that, like, NGU technology? It's like changing the world. It's like it's the most amazing thing. It's like even bigger than AI and everything. And people are like, oh shit, what? NGU technology? Like, yeah, number go up. They're like, what? But it's true. And look, like, greed obviously has a downside. Like 2017, a lot of people got burned with greed. So I think best case scenario, greed is what catches their attention and brings them in and brings them to the table and has them engaged in the conversation. And then you
Mm,
hit them based on wherever they're at, or what their interests are, with a little bit more of the substance around this thing. Right. So,
right.
like, yes, NGU technology is there and it's beautiful, baby. And you can have some of that. But also, look at this stuff, or whatever the angle is that works for that person. That's usually my approach.
Yeah, yeah. I 100% agree with you, man. Uh, I think when the time that Bitcoin went to like $20,000, there wasn't a single day where like I didn't hear someone talk about Bitcoin.
Right.
Whenever it goes up, it gets a lot more interest, and some of them do fade away, but it gets a lot of more people in it. So
Sure.
when the numbers go up, that's when we see a lot more people joining, and yeah, that's great, man. Hopefully,
A
I see
hundred,
more of that as
a
well.
hundred percent. Like the next, presumably there'll be a next run, and when and if there is, a lot of people will come in, and a lot of people will be dragged in by greed, and then presuming there's another pullback, and I know there's some debate on that, but let's just assume that there is. Then 50%, 60%, 70%, 90% of the people that came in just for the pump, they might leave. They may
Mm,
be like, screw this shit. Like this is,
yeah,
I don't want to lose any more money. But 10% will become those new hodlers, right? They will add to the
right,
floor, and they will get
right,
it, and they will see it, and they will go down the rabbit hole, and they'll be like,
right.
oh, and then so that just slowly grows and grows, and more people start getting it. And one of the things I've always been curious about, like I look out on the world and I see all these massive problems, and one of the big issues is like there's so many people that are either don't care enough or not educated enough to understand what's going on and how to like don't even care to turn things around. Like a lot of people don't even think that things could be better, basically. And I've
Mm,
always wondered, like, how do you turn that around? Because that, like, behavior is such an ingrained thing, right? We get in our habits
mm,
and like of behavior, and we stay there. And what's amazing about Bitcoin, and this is a subject that I've been like really enjoyed delving into, but it in a lot of people that I've talked to, it has many different and interesting impacts on their behavior, and it starts to change their
right,
behavior, whether
right.
it lowers their time preference, whether it changes their approach to their health and their fitness, whether it
Mm,
changes their approach to their family and their friends and their social life. Like it's just so many of these changes, and so it's a behavioral revolution,
right.
maybe more than anything. And that makes me hopeful, almost more so, because that solves the problem that I saw before, that I didn't know what the fix was. But if this can both fix it from a structural point of view, and like how money is created and transferred and stored in a society, but also has this effect on changing behavior, man, then that's a really hopeful proposition.
Yeah, I think you've touched on a very important topic, man. I also like to think of Bitcoin as like a Trojan horse of information. I've seen that a lot of people, new people that get into Bitcoin, they start to question like everything. It's
Yeah.
like it also like it lowers their time preference, and it actually makes them evaluate every single action that they do today that impacts them in the future. Myself is an example of this. When I got into Bitcoin, man, everything changed, man. Like I started to consider I started to consider which actions of mine negatively impacted in me in the future, and I canceled them out and started to focus on the positives. And that's another important aspect of Bitcoin. It's not only about like savings as well. It's about like changing your time preference, lowering your time preference as well. I think that's like the key takeaway from me about Bitcoin. Um, so yeah, like if I were to draw a comparison, right? So in terms of fiat and Bitcoin, right? It's fiat's very nature to cause people to have like high time preference. That's why I think we may actually like that's why I see like a lot of people actually not considering the future and such like that because they store value in an asset that depreciates every single year. Whereas people that own Bitcoin, they mostly inclined about saving and have a lower time preference and consider the future more than the present.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. And it's, again, it's interesting that just because a lot of this can be subconscious, even like
Right.
especially on the fiat side, like a lot of people don't see the relationship between fiat
Mm,
money and how they behave. Once you come into Bitcoin and you start to notice the behavior change, you're like, oh, interesting. The quality and the type of the money that you use actually has an impact on your behavior. And
Right.
but I think most people, like one of the things in a fiat world, like I think a lot of people feel this subconscious anxiety about the future. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any security about the future at all. Like, and even if they have some assets and stuff, it's still like I've always just got to be like making sure that I keep, producing, so the future keeps, like, it's like laying down bricks in front of you as you go. It's like I just got to keep what, one brick at a time. But
Yeah.
for me, Bitcoin has an effect of taking away that anxiety, because I know it's going to be there, and I know my share of it is not going to be diminished. So
Right.
yes, let's say there's some risk that it doesn't exist at all in the future. It's a failed experiment, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But first of all, I think that's a pretty low probability. But if that's not the case, then I've got this thing behind me that's giving me a great deal of comfort and diminishing my anxiety about the future. And that has a tremendous impact on my present, because it allows me to be so much more focused in the present. It allows me to make decisions that serve my longer term future in the present. It allows me to defer my gratification
Indeed.
into the future, right? Instead of
Right.
just being like, oh shit, I don't know anything that's going to happen in the future. I might as well bring it all into right now. And that's what, like, this debt fueled system that we have is, right? It's bringing forward all this demand by
Yeah.
all this debt so we can experience it right now.
Exactly. Yeah, like, oh, another important point, man. Man, you hitting me with these good stuff, eh? Yeah, like if I were to draw a comparison with like mainstream economists and like Austrians, mainstream economists, right? There's a fundamental, I'd say, law that they reject always in terms of advising governments with their policies. And it's simple. You cannot consume without producing, right? Let's say, for example, we're in an island and I need to eat fish. I need to go to a lake and take the fish away from there. That's me producing something. And production comes from like savings, right? That's how an economy thrives. It comes from savings. Sorry, let me just switch off my phone. Yeah. It comes from savings. That, and these mainstream economists, they don't get that. Everything to them is always about like consumption. It's always about stimulating aggregate demand. That's what we see with central banks as well, with the cutting of interest rates currently. It's like whenever there's a crisis, it's because there's a lack of demand. We need to make sure that people consume more and more and more and have less savings. And that's catastrophic. That will leave people extremely vulnerable to future crises that these central banks cause themselves, and perhaps even governments right now with the whole lockdown around the world. Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of negatives with holding fiat because it's based off consumption, consumption, and consumption,
Yeah.
and less savings and savings, savings. Yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, two questions here. One, in the course of your education, right? Like in your school, when you're interacting with professors, do you have these sort of discussions or debates with them? Because I presume that not probably very few are Bitcoiners. Probably
nice.
like not probably less than half are hard money economists. So like
Mm.
what's the nature of your interaction with your professors around, this subject and the current state of affairs?
Yeah, well, I tried. It happened once when I tried to engage with a lecture regarding Bitcoin, and that particular lecturer brought it up in class. She basically stated that, oh dang it, I just gave away her gender. I wanted to make her anonymous.
I
Anyway,
think she'll be okay.
yeah, she said that Bitcoin cannot be a stable. What do you say? Bitcoin cannot be money because it's unstable. Whereas if you look at currencies
Right.
such as the rand, the dollar, the British pound, they're stable because they have a central bank behind them.
Mm.
And so I raised up my hand. I was like, but Zimbabwe had a central bank behind them. Look at what happened to their currency, and it was that was not well received. And so since that day,
Get out, Bheki. Get out of here.
yeah, get out, get out. And since that day, I just like try not to like start that conversation unless they want to have that conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, like when I look at them, right, or when they teach us this theory, and it's mostly Keynesian theory, there's a lot of contradictions with Keynesian theory. Like, why does everything need to be expensive? They cannot explain that, right? I thought it's good that things become cheaper, right? Because Keynesians are always obsessed about raising demand through the form of more spending by governments, or the printing of money and lowering of interest rates, and that results in things becoming more expensive. And they say, no, that's needed for there to be economic growth. And that's a contradiction in itself, because if you define what economic growth is, it's the increase in production, it's the increase in the quantity of goods and services. So that makes things cheaper.
Hmm.
And so I try not to engage my lectures with that, because at first it's frustrating, because when you come up to them and you try to have like a conversation about that, bear in mind that these people have been studying this theory for years, and you come up and you're like a young guy here talking about like trying to explain to them that they're contradicting themselves. It's not going to be well received. So
Yeah.
I just shut up and just read my I just buy Bitcoin and read what I think is educational to me, and
Right.
I just continue with my life.
Just pass the test, stack your sats, and don't
Exactly.
ruffle any feathers.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm happy with that. I'll keep quiet, pass the test. I'll write your Keynesian theory. It's fine. I'll write your Keynesian, and in my spare time, I'll read like Mises and stuff, and I'll buy Bitcoin later that day. So I'm good.
Yeah, man, it's wild. Like I've had a number of conversations with, pretty well known and pretty high level people that are in the free banking and gold camp, or just in the standard economics camp, and it's pretty. And like you said, they've spent their whole career on this, and it's
Yeah.
extreme. And their views is what got them their tenure at their university, or their think tank job, or their consulting gig, or whatever. It's almost impossible that they're going to turn on a dime and be like, you know what? I've been wrong for the last 30 years,
Yeah.
and now I'm going to
Unlikely.
go down this road. Um, but even so, like some these arguments that you mentioned, like the price stability, come up so often, and people just there's so many counter arguments to that argument, whether you want to take it in the form of like a new money being monetized. And of course, as it becomes distributed, there's going to be a lot of price volatility until it's in the hands of like the vast majority of people tend to think like supply elasticity is really good. And I think, and the gold bugs would be like, oh my god, fiat currency is horrible, 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 horrible,
Mhm.
because the supply can be is too elastic, I guess.
Too
But two
less, yeah.
percent 2% elasticity, that's a nice level of elasticity, for solid prices and stuff. And they just don't understand the
Yeah.
relationship of the hard money and the price signal, and the kind of
Mm,
the importance of the price signal, and what an inelastic money ultimately allows a money to do, kind of as a measure of value. Having
right.
that supply elasticity perverts that. And obviously that's maybe a bit harder to see in the context of a money that's just emerging. And to be fair, there's not a lot of context for this, right? Like, we haven't nobody alive today was around when gold monetized. Now, presumably,
Mm,
like, whether that was 2,000 3,000 years ago with coinage, but
mm.
probably further back when gold became like a unit of money of some
Yeah,
kind.
medium exchange, yeah.
And what was it like then? Where people, it must have been pretty volatile when it just started happening. And
Right,
so we don't, and that was the last time it really happened. And so
right.
nobody alive today has any context for like an actual new form of upgraded money uh, distributing itself throughout the world. I mean, it's a very unique circumstance, so I can kind
Yeah,
of appreciate that people can't see it for what it is. But it's both disheartening, and I'm super optimistic that a lot of these like old economist types don't get it, because it means more for us, and the future is
yeah,
going to be
exactly.
built by better minds, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, exactly, man. And I think like the future's so uncertain. And I think they they're searching for safety really, and their safety is like the years of basically studying like Keynesian economics. Um, I'm not particularly sure why, for example, the questions hasn't started to like bubble up in their minds, because when I was introduced to Keynesian economics, I would ask questions all the time, like why, how do these individuals at a central bank know what's the correct interest rates for the markets? Well, how do they know that this is the correct money supply for the economy?
Right.
And these are questions that were never answered. And like another question that I ask is like, what causes business cycles? And in university, they don't tell you what causes business cycles. They don't tell you, even though if you look at the context of it, like if you research John Maynard Keynes, he would say like it's animal spirits. In university, it just happens. They don't tell you what Keynesian said himself, saying like it's animal spirits. So I don't know why um, people that are in university studying economics right now spending a lot of money on like on this on Keynesian economics don't start asking questions like simple questions. I mean, doesn't even have to be complicated questions, like just simple questions, and you'll see like the absurdity of it all, honestly.
Yeah. But you know what, man? I think part of the answer to that question, as sad as it may be, is that most people just don't care. They're not in university to learn. They're in
Mm,
university to get credentialed, to pass the test that they need to test, to get the job that they want to get, to have the life that they want to have the status that they want to have. Like, and I know that sounds, really kind of, critical, and it is, but my experience, I went to university too. Like, people aren't seeking truth. They're
right.
just seeking validation, and enough validation to get them the lifestyle and the future that they want. And they've been conditioned to understand that if I pass these tests, I will get this job, I will get this money, I will have this house, I will have this car, I will have this future. That's what I want. Why the fuck would I question any of this stuff? I don't care about the truth. I care about what I want, and this is the way to get it.
I see. I see. I think that makes sense.
For most
That
people,
makes
I mean,
sense. For most people, yeah, like there's always those outliers. But I see, I
that's
think I
us,
see
dude.
that. Yeah.
we're the outliers.
Yeah, that's
So,
so true.
and some people just look at things, and they try to understand them, and they put it through their own mental framework. And if things don't add up, then they go, why doesn't it add up? Like, it's not making sense to me. And I think a lot of people are just afraid to say this doesn't make sense to me, so they figure out a way to make the thing that doesn't make sense
Makes sense.
make
Makes
sense.
sense.
you know
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Biggie,
Yeah,
let me know, because I don't know much about. One of my best friends is actually from South Africa, and he's living there now. But I don't
yeah.
know much about what's going on there economically, or in relation to how Bitcoin is perceived and spreading, and what kind of like a Bitcoin ecosystem exists there. Can you just
Hmm.
like give me a rundown of what things are like there now?
Well, currently, right now, just like any other country or most countries, we are under lockdown, and we've been under lockdown for like 2 months now. Now,
Right.
there's a lot of fear from like South Africans, and I think that's why at the start of the lockdown, a lot of South Africans sort of welcomed the lockdown, right? Because they saw it as a way in which the South African government was taking action. And then once it started getting extended, that's when a lot of people started to change their perspective, because they started seeing that a lot of people now are losing jobs, a lot of people are not earning an income anymore. And we started seeing a lot of ridiculous regulations from government, right? We started seeing, for example, the banning of alcohol and like cigarettes. We started seeing the definition of what's essential and non-essential. Basically, if you were a nurse, you could go to work, but then if you were like someone who works, let's say for example, at a mechanic, you couldn't go to work. So those individuals, their income was completely slashed. So
Mm.
that's when the perspective of the lockdown started to change. So I suspect that things will get a lot worse, or the damage that's been done, we'll start to see that after the lockdown. And a lot of people will be quite angry against like the government. I mean, flip, I think they even banned e-commerce. Imagine, like they banned e-commerce because they deemed it was unfair. That's what the trade minister stated. And w- this basically, when all of this commotion with the lockdown thing and the ridiculous regulations from government has basically affirmed my perspective of government, stating that these people do not know how to run an economy. They do not know themselves. They're just messing it up, and it looks like they're making up stuff as they go. Honestly,
Of course they are.
yeah, yeah. I mean, even like if we would look at the stimulus packages that was introduced, it was they stated that it was like 500 million. But if you dig into the numbers, it's not really that much. But even so, that's adding to our debt levels, right? That means that they will need to increase taxes, meaning an extraction of wealth from South African citizens,
Hmm.
or print money, which they have spoken about numerous times. I mean, we had the deputy minister here stating that uh, he would like the central bank, the South African Reserve Bank, to print money and buy government bonds so that the government has funds to spend on various things that they want. Now, now, this is an extraction of wealth, and it's something that I've also seen as well from around the world. Even the US, when I saw them signing the 2 trillion stimulus package, I saw that as like the biggest extraction of wealth, and they were saying it's the biggest stimulus that they've ever signed as such.
Mm.
So yeah, so things are not particularly good in terms of like economy. Um, yeah, so yeah, that's. I hope I painted a good picture there, man.
Yeah, man. I mean, look, I don't think even if governments and government, people in government are well intentioned, you
Right.
can't possibly run economies of the size that exist in the world today as a
Right.
centralized entity. You can never
Right.
aggregate enough information. And not to mention, even if you could, which again, I don't think you can, but if you
Yeah.
could, like, what are we striving for here? So many people here in Canada, I talk to my friends and stuff. People have their opinions about the virus and this and that. And, some people like working from home now. And obviously, some people have lost their jobs. So they're not happy about it. But like, almost I can't think of anybody I've heard make the case that the government shouldn't have this level of power in the first place to be able
Right.
to
They
shut
shouldn't.
down everything and to
They
say
should
you can't
not.
make a living for yourself. Like
Right.
nobody's even talking about that.
That, yeah, like it's crazy, man. That is something they should not have that power. They should not have the power to tell someone that they cannot go to work.
Yeah.
And like you also touched on something, another thing that was important there. You talked about like this lockdown. This lockdown affects people differently. I can work. I can work. I can normally work myself, but like a low income earning South African, let's say that works in construction,
Yeah.
he's not getting an income now.
Yeah.
Like, what happens to that guy? Those people are not like considered, right? And so it's this inability of government to see unintended consequences that causes havoc.
Hmm. Even in the context of an extremely fragile system that they have created. So you put those
Right.
two things together, not being able to see consequences and a super fragile system, you're going to get massive problems. And you mentioned the taxation, the debt that ultimately has to come in the form of taxation, whether it's direct or via inflation. That's
Mm,
another thing. People in this country, in Canada, like the political dialogue was heated last year because the current government was running a $25 billion deficit. And that was one of the larger ones that have been, in a long time. And,
yes.
it was this big subject of debate. The projected deficit this year is 250 billion. That's a 10x.
Oh,
And people hear that and they just don't seem to have a framework for what that actually means.
oh
That
man.
means that at some point, by hook or by crook, by inflation or by direct taxation,
You're paying
you
for
are
it.
going to be paying 10x the cost because the government
Right.
gets its money from you, one way
You.
or the other.
Yeah, it's not their money, it's your money.
Yeah. And so if they spend 10 times, that means you
Yeah,
pay 10
you pay
times.
10 times. Yeah, yeah, exactly. But I do suspect that things may start to change here in South Africa. A lot of people are starting to distrust this South African government, right?
Yeah.
In the last elections, a lot more people didn't vote than the people that voted. So I think what's happening right now is that I think South Africans are waiting for something better than the current ANC government, which is the current government ruling South Africa.
Mm.
So I think things are starting to change. I think seeing certain things change where people are fed up. They do not agree with the way that the government's running the country right now. And a lot of people don't actually see this, mainly because um, they do not see, for example, what the low income South African is going through. They do not see that.
Yeah.
Like I'm comfortable where I am working from home, but it's like what I said, like that person that lost their job. And the thing about South Africa is that a lot of people are dependent on people that are earning, right? So let's say you have a household, right? And you have one individual in that household working.
Hmm.
Now, suddenly, if that and the family here is dependent on that person working, if he get an income, then they get food and all that stuff. Now, if he has lost an income due to the lockdown, which some of these individuals have lost their jobs and such, now that whole family does not get like an income to rely on.
Yeah.
So that's dangerous.
Totally,
That's
man.
yeah,
And the way that government works is that, and this paradigm that frankly a lot of the population feeds into, if there's a problem everyone looks to the government and says, hey, do something about it. And they don't realize that that creates more problems, and when more problems emerge and people go to the government and say, hey, do something about it, their actions make sure that more and worse problems will happen down the road in this virtuous cycle that just ends in disaster, and nobody can see
yeah,
it. And the other thing is, like, we talk about in this space a lot, like, man, things are probably going to get really bad. But
right,
for those people that you referred to, and they exist in America and Canada and South Africa and every country of the world, things have been really bad for a lot of people for a while already. Like, people have
right,
had no jobs, people have had no income, people have been on food stamps, have in poverty, homeless, all that kind of stuff. So, like,
right.
it's not like we're waiting for something to happen. We're waiting for it to happen to more people. And
Mm,
once it happens to more people, like, there'll be a threshold at some point where more people is most people, and then you get, again, like you said, unintended consequences. I mean, look what's happened in the States right now. I know it was set off by police brutality, but a lot of people are just very frustrated. They have nothing to lose. They're angry, all these things.
mm,
And what do
mm.
people do in that situation? Well, they do unpredictable, nonsensical things sometimes, and that doesn't serve anybody. But you can be
Yeah,
damn
civil
sure,
unrest. Yeah,
yeah. But the cause is perversion of
right,
free markets based on government intervention. I mean, it all comes back to
right,
that, and the lever that they do that through is the money, and that is why we're so adamant that we need to
right,
fix the money, right?
right. Yeah. And I think when South Africa went to lockdown, we were in a much vulnerable state than other countries because of the whole intervention that governments were imposing. So the South African government has various state-owned enterprises, right? And they were constantly getting bailouts, right? And through the regulation, I think South Africa is a so, well, the ANC government, right? I would define the ANC government as a socialist government, right? But they're not a socialist government in the sense that they own the means of production. They're a socialist government in the sense that they regulate the means of production to themselves. So it's like
Sure.
regulation, in other words, interventionism.
Hmm.
So it's all of these years of interventionism that has basically led to South Africa and having high unemployment rates and all that stuff. And when we went into the lockdown, that has merely accelerated that trend, right?
Hmm.
I think we're going to see a lot more people going into poverty, unfortunately, and a lot of like the mainstream news outlets are not really seeing this. Even here in South Africa, not seeing the consequences of the lockdown.
Hmm.
When it started, or before South Africa went into the lockdown, we a lot of media journalists and all that were calling for the lockdown, um, because they couldn't see like they couldn't see the unintended consequences. They couldn't see the trade-offs, right? And I hope now that they will be able to see that no, we shouldn't have done this in the first place, and it should never happen that a government should have this much power
Yeah.
at all. We even have a curfew, man. Like we can't go out at a particular point in time. That's crazy.
Yeah, it
That's
is.
insane.
It is. I saw a funny meme. It was the founding fathers in the U.S. in the whatever building they were when they were signing, like, the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution, or one of those founding documents. and it was funny because it's like freedom of association, freedom
Right.
of speech, all this kind of stuff. And then at the bottom was like, just so we're clear, none of this applies if there's a virus, right? But it's true, right? It's like
Uh,
it's so counter to what at least that country, the principles that it was founded on, and the U.S. at least has a document that people can refer to and say like, aren't we supposed to be doing like what this thing says? Most countries
right,
don't even have that, so the governments aren't even really limited by like some supposed restriction on their behavior. It's just like
right.
we hope they don't act. We hope they don't restrict our freedoms too much. But as I've been saying throughout all this, this lockdown makes you realize you don't have freedom, you don't have rights. What you have are permissions, right? So
Yeah,
anytime you're in a dynamic where someone can overcome the defenses that you deploy to ensure your freedom,
yeah,
anytime you're in a situation where someone can overcome your defenses of establishing your own freedom, then what you have is permissions, and those permissions are at the mercy of the people that have power over you. And if they
yeah,
want to take them away, there's not a goddamn thing you can do about it.
yeah. And that's why I value Bitcoin, because it's a
Yeah.
choice. It's an exit door from all of that nonsense, man. Um, it basically allows me to make sure that I take away all of that political influence and all of the central bank influence out of the equation of my money. That's why I am into Bitcoin, and that's why I value it so much. And to talk about another point, which I think is also interesting, which links up to government interventionism, is that for about a few years now, the South African government was trying to pass a bill which would change the constitution of South Africa and allow expropriation without compensation, right? It also goes to that whole thing of South African government is really like a socialist government in the sense that they want to undermine property rights in South Africa, right?
Mm.
So if, for example, I own a house, right? If this bill was passed, and I think they're still going to follow it up after this lockdown, if this bill was passed, then the South African government could just take my home and that's it. No freedom there. It's gone. Whereas they cannot do that with my Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't have my private key, they can fuck off. Sorry for the swearing, but so yeah, like that's the thing that I like about Bitcoin. Yes, it's about like self-responsibility, and I think that's also important, but it's about taking all of that influence away from the equation. And that's my key takeaway as well from Bitcoin.
100%, man. I mean, it enhances your ability to defend your property, right?
Right.
By storing it in a method that's one, extremely cost effective to defend, but extremely difficult to overcome those defenses. Like, yes, you could still be, someone puts a gun to your head and says, give me your private key, then you might have to think about it. But I love the way that it changes the dynamic and the costs of initiating violence, because throughout human history, the things that were the most valuable were, like, let's take gold. It's such concentrated value that
Mm,
every
mm.
country, every kingdom, every civilization, put it in this safe place and guarded it. But
Yeah.
there's an incentive by that tribe over there, by that country over there. If they think they're more powerful than you, they'll just ride up on you and be like, yo,
Yeah.
we're going to kill everybody if you don't give us that gold. And they'll be like, oh, okay, here you go. Or they'll just kill it and take it, right? There's an incentive to use violence. But now where something, your kind of acquisition of this extremely concentrated value cannot be insured by violence. Violence can still, like, be a part of it, but it way changes the dynamic, because it doesn't guarantee that you can take it just because you've deployed violence, whereas in the past that has been the case. And I'm extremely excited for what that means for a more peaceful world in the future that is predicated on storing more and more and more value in Bitcoin.
Right. I 100% agree with you there, man. It's definitely about non-violence.
Yeah.
Mainly because big governments is always violence. It's always violence to big governments.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean,
that's how they
if
enforce, their existence, right?
yeah, I mean, there was this individual here in South Africa because alcohol was banned here, but he was drinking it in his property, in his yard, right? So there's soldiers, right? the soldiers are guarding the streets during a lockdown. You're not supposed to be out at a particular time. You're not supposed to be drinking alcohol or smoking a cigarette. So this South African chap, and let me not call him a chap. Sorry about that. South African individual, he was drinking alcohol in his yard, right? And the soldiers saw him drink alcohol, went into his yard and beat him up, and he died from that. So that's the problem with like big governments. They always enforce with violence.
Yeah.
Always the case.
Well, like if you've read, Rothbard and these people, like why does the state exist at all? It exists to
Monopolize
intervene
violence.
that
Yeah.
in methods that's counter to what the free market wants to do, right? And so the
Right.
only way you can do that is ultimately through force. Like you may have some preliminary measures to try to avoid that, but the buck stops at force, and that's why the governments have to have a monopoly on force and power.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's extremely sad, honestly, because a lot of individuals suffer the
Yeah.
consequences and not them.
Well, man, I want to finish on a positive note.
Yes,
so
please.
so
Please.
so tell me, like, this was I kind of started asking this a second ago, but we didn't really touch on it. But um, characterize for me, you know, the Bitcoin ecosystem in South Africa.
Oh,
Like what's
yes.
going on,
Yes.
the businesses, the people, the interest, all that kind of stuff. Tell me what's going on
Yeah,
there.
so I'd say there's definitely a lot of interest of ordinary South Africans in like Bitcoin. I see this with mainly Luno. I think Luno's an exchange here in South Africa. It's a popular exchange here in South Africa. A lot of people are starting to acquire Bitcoin by using Luno or other exchanges such as IceCube, which is another Bitcoin exchange or crypto exchange. Um, Even in an institutional level, there's a private bank in South Africa called Investec that is interested in Bitcoin. I'm not particularly sure what they're going to do in the future. They haven't announced it fully, so I think that's something that you should watch out for as well, because it's something that might happen with them as well. Um, but yeah, definitely a lot of South Africans are seeing that it's getting more expensive for them to go about their daily lives, right? Living now is more expensive than it was 10 years ago. Um, this could be due to like the printing of money by the SARB, or it could be that the rand is depreciating compared to other currencies. And so when we import stuff, because we need to import for certain goods, everything else becomes more expensive. So I think there's a bubbling up of questions on like ordinary South Africans as to, okay, I need to store my value. And it's clear to me that I cannot store it in the rand because of political influence, because of other factors as well. So it's, I think that that question will eventually lead them on to Bitcoin, something like Bitcoin. Yeah, basically.
And so, I know you're going into a job at the think tank when you're done school, but do you have any aspirations or plans to kind of be a part of that educational process for people, or are you just kind of operate under the radar and do your thing?
Um, Man, I honestly do want to like educate people on like Bitcoin and stuff, but I don't know if I have that much of attraction, honestly.
Dude, is
I
there
mean,
any?
like,
I
sorry,
was
yeah, continue.
I was just gonna ask, are there any like podcasts based in South Africa for Bitcoin or anything like that?
I think there's this one individual called Lewis Neal. He, I've been talking to him, and he wanted to start a podcast. But there's another platform called Cliff Central, and there's this guy that talks about Bitcoin as well. So there is one or two, but not many that I'm aware of. But most of them come from like overseas and such. Yeah.
And what do you mean traction? What do you mean?
Man, I don't know, man. Like I just feel like, how can I say this? I don't know. I sometimes think that I cannot explain things well enough that a lot of people would be like interested in listening to me. There's a lot of like smart guys out there that I'd be more than willing to like to tell someone new to Bitcoin, like you should listen to this guy, or here's a reading page from Jameson Lopp that you should follow and all that. Um, Yeah, I do not honestly see myself as like an educator or something.
Bro. So first of all, me neither, right? I never thought
Yeah,
about myself as an educator. All I wanted to do was have these conversations with like-minded people around Bitcoin.
right.
But look, the thing is, it's like there's no one source or one method of disseminating information about stuff. Like
Yeah,
the method and style of delivery and the angle you use and the doorway you go through is going to be totally different for like a farmer in China than it is for a banker in New York. So like we
mm,
all come from this from different perspectives, and that is our value, that we have our own perspective, and that perspective will resonate with some people, whether they be in our immediate environment or halfway around the world, right? And
right,
also, you don't have to know everything from day one. Like there's so much about Bitcoin I don't know. There's so much about
yeah,
economics I don't know. I'm humbled by it every single day. But
right.
like the best way to learn is to
Is
actually put
doing.
yourself out there and try to articulate it, and then maybe embarrass yourself sometimes, maybe say the wrong thing, maybe have someone on Twitter be like, yo, you're a fucking idiot, you don't know anything about this shit, and then be like, okay, all right, like I'm willing to get better, I'll listen. And then you get better and you get better and you keep doing it. And as far as audience is concerned, like what if you just impacted one person? That would be awesome.
That would be
Like what
awesome.
if you
Yeah,
convince one person to put a portion of their savings in Bitcoin, and that enhance their quality of life 10 years from now? Like that would be great.
yeah, that
And
would be
if it's 100
great.
people, if it's 1,000 people, it's a million, all the better. But and I'm not pressuring you into like do a podcast or anything, but I think a lot of people discredit themselves by thinking that their perspective is not as valuable as it is. Like we all come from unique perspectives, and the way we communicate and what we communicate is going to resonate with different people across the board. And so if it's something that you enjoy doing and you're passionate about, then I wouldn't let the fear that it's not going to attract a big audience or resonate with many people hold you back. If you don't want to do it, that should hold you back because you don't want to be doing something that you don't enjoy. But if it's those sort of considerations, I would just say, screw it, let's do it, sort of thing.
Yeah, I think you have a point there, man. Yeah.
And you're famous, bro. You're on
Yeah.
a documentary. All right, man.
That's true. That's true.
Um,
Thank you so much.
so I finished these
That I
off
need
with
to
just
get to. Yeah.
a really quick rapid fire, right? So it's just I'll say the
Yeah.
word and you tell me the first thing that pops into your head, all right?
Okay.
Democracy,
Sucks.
the Lightning Network,
Privacy.
government,
Too big.
human rights,
Need to be protected.
violence,
Shouldn't happen unless it's for protection and you have a gun and you're protecting
Trump,
your property.
Trump,
Oh, lukewarm, half and half. Sometimes hot, sometimes agree with them, sometimes I don't. Lukewarm.
ego,
I don't have any, and I don't know. I don't have any. That's the first thing that comes to mind.
FOMO,
Shouldn't people shouldn't have FOMO when they thinking about savings.
wealth,
Bitcoin. Yo, that
privacy,
was the first. So
privacy.
privacy. Privacy. What can I say? Okay, CoinJoin, but I haven't done much research on CoinJoin, but CoinJoin, that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Nice. Hate speech
Should not be illegal.
should not be illegal.
Yeah, should not
Yeah.
be illegal. Yeah.
Gold,
Sound money.
guns,
Buy them.
revolution,
Oh man, this is a tricky one because it could mean socialist revolution or it could mean free market revolution. So free market revolution
socialism,
sucks.
family,
Important. Number one,
inequality,
inequality. It depends which one you're talking about. If you're talking about asset price inflation, which causes inequality amongst people that got in early because of the central bank intervention, that sucks. No, it sucks.
hell, like heaven and hell,
Heaven and hell, not going there anytime soon.
liberty,
Important, protect liberty.
energy,
Do not waste it.
and Bitcoin.
And again, sound money.
Bheki, man, this has been super fun. I really appreciate you giving me the time. Is there anything in closing you wanted to say or share or direct people to?
Stack stats. Satoshi.
Stack sats, right?
Yeah, stack Satoshis. And thank you so much for having me on, John. And thank you so much, listeners. And yeah, hopefully uh, we see more people buying Bitcoin and all of that.
What's your Twitter handle if you want to direct people there?
Oh yeah, so my Twitter handle is Mahlobo, Mahlobo _BHEKI. I'm not currently active on Twitter because my my schedule is kind of hectic, but I'm always free to have conversations with anyone that tries to like have a conversation with me. Just DM me and I'll reply.
Awesome. Well, man, look, I really appreciate the time again. I look forward to seeing how things progress for you. If you ever want any help with podcasting or anything else, just hit me up. And
I
I look
will.
forward to another conversation sometime in the future, man.
Thank you so much, man. I look forward to having another conversation and listening to your future episodes. Thank you
All
for
right,
having me
brother.
on.
Take care.
Cheers. Take
Peace.
care. Peace.